Welcome to Shadows and Scripts, a journey into the unseen, unheard, and unforgettable. Here we bring alive untold stories hidden in the corners of history and the depths of human emotion. Every shadow holds a secret, and every script breathes life into it. This is where untold stories come alive. Long before the skyscrapers, or even long before the internet, the southern tip of India was home to an empire so vast that its ships ruled the waves, its temples touched the skies, and its name was whispered across seas from China to Africa. This is the story of the Cholas, a dynasty that began as kings of river and rose to become the masters of the Indian Ocean. Our journey begins along the gentle yet mighty banks of Kaveri River thousands of years ago. The smell of earth, the sun glittering over endless paddy fields, and the drums echoing in the distance. This is no mere land. This is the cradle of a dynasty that will one day shake the oceans. Legend speaks of King Karigala Cholan, a name that has survived the wear and tear of 2 millennia. His name means the man with the charred legs, a scar from a fierce battle, a permanent reminder that greatness demands a price. But Karigala was not to limp through history. He ran. No, he thundered it straight into immortality. Karigala Cholan's reign around the 2nd century CE was not merely about sitting on a throne and giving orders. No, he was a builder. He was a visionary, and when needed, a lion on the battlefield. His greatest legacy, the Kallanai Dam on the Grand Anakin, a structure of stone and engineering genius that still stands today, making even our so-called modern rulers who built marble palaces for themselves look, well, let's just say less than impressive. Where others plundered, Karigala Cholan provided, while some kings centuries later melt entire treasuries into ornaments for their own egos. Karigala Cholan spent his wealth on taming rivers, nourishing villages, and making sure not a single grain went to waste. The Kaveri's floods were turned into a gift rather than a curse. Water became prosperity, not destruction. The early Cholas were not yet the mighty ocean crossing empire they would become. They were a dynasty in its youth, fierce, ambitious, and already skilled in agriculture, diplomacy, and warfare. They traded pearls, fine cotton, and spices with lands as far as away Rome, Southeast Asia, and even China. Roman gold coins are still unearthed in Tamil Nadu, which speaks of this trade, whispering a tale of Tamil merchants walking on the streets of the Roman cities without bowing to any foreign overlord. But history, the history is a cruel storyteller. By the 3rd century, the Cholas were not the roaring tigers they once were. The Pallavas and the Pandyas rose, and for centuries the Cholas became mere chieftains. Their mighty roar reduced to a faint growl. It was a long night for the Cholas, and while they lay low far to the north, future rulers, the kind who loved silk tents, perfumed cushions, and endless court dances, would fight over forts like spoiled children over toys. They built monuments not to last millennia but to flatter their own vanity. Unlike the Kallanai, their works would crumble in centuries, sometimes in decades. The Cholas, however, were patient. They waited because they very well knew something the others did not. An empire worth building is not an empire built overnight. Their time would come again, and when it did, the rivers would feed armies, the ports would hum with ships, and the oceans themselves would carry the Cholas' roar to the corners of the known world. The Chola roar fell silent, but in the silence, seeds of revival were waiting. It is the 9th century, and the Chola lion is about to roar again. For centuries, the mighty tiger of the Kaveri plains had slept, licking its wounds, watching the rise and fall of other powers. The Pallavas had their day, the Pandyas strutted across the stage, but in the shadows, a man watched and waited. His name was Vijayalaya Chola. In 1850 CE, Vijayalaya was just a minor feudatory under the Pallavas, a small tiger in the service of a larger jungle lord. But he had what many rulers lacked: patience, vision, and the instinct to strike at the perfect moment. And the moment came. The Pandyas were weak, bleeding from internal disputes. The Pallavas distracted by wars elsewhere. And so, like a tiger that stalks its prey for hours before the pounce, Vijayalaya moved. His claws tore through enemy defenses. His banner flew high, and Tanjore was his. But this was no ordinary conquest. Tanjavur was not just a city, it was to become the beating heart of the reborn Chola Empire. Vijayalaya Chola declared it the new Chola capital, and as the first stones of the Vijayalaya Cholishwaram temple rose under the southern sun, the world heard the message loud and clear: the Cholas are back. And here's the thing: when the Cholas built, they built to last. The temple was not just a place of worship, it was a proclamation carved in stone, a promise to the gods and to the people and to the history itself. Unlike future rulers who would arrive from far off lands, demanding tribute and spending it on perfumed palaces and jeweled thrones for their own pleasure, the Cholas understood that true power lays in leaving behind something that even centuries of wind, rain, and war could not erase. The Cholas' temples were more than architecture. They were textbooks in stone, living history lessons in faith, science, and artistry. Vijayalaya's successors took his spark and turned into a flame. Aditya I, his son, rode into battle against the Pallavas and defeated them, reclaiming Chola's lands and pride. He did not just fight, he reorganized, built alliances, and set the stage for empire's expansion. Then came the Parantaka Chola I, a king who wore his victories like a warrior's necklace. He defeated the Pandyas and even thrust Chola influence deep into Sri Lanka. And when he celebrated his victories, it was not with fleeting displays of wealth, but with endowments to temples, irrigation works, and trade. Because For Cholas, the wealth was not about hoarding gold in hidden treasuries to be guarded by silk robed courtiers. It was about making the land fertile, the ports busy, and the people loyal. By the late 10th century, the Chola throne was no longer the seat of a regional power. It was the launch pad of an empire, and soon the age of conquerors would begin. From a spark lit by the Vijayalaya Chola, a flame now blazed. In the year 985 CE, a king ascended the Chola throne, whose very name would echo across mountains, rivers, and oceans. Rajaraja Chola the Great. But make no mistake, Rajaraja was not born into greatness. He forged it the moment he took the throne. The old Chola rule turned into a thunderclap. The army was reorganized into a disciplined war machine. No longer were they just local warriors defending their fields. They become a professional force armed with elephants, cavalry, archers, and infantry drilled for lightning strikes. And then the seas began to stir. While many rulers, both before and after him, were content to strut about their courts, writing poetry about themselves and taxing their people into misery and to fund marble halls. Rajaraja understood that real power did not come from simply sitting on a throne. It came from being able to defend the throne from every direction, land or sea. So he built something the subcontinent had rarely seen, a navy capable of dominating the Bay of Bengal, from Kalinga in the north to Sri Lanka in the south. His banners flew, his ships carried soldiers, traders, and the ultimate weight of the Chola authority. Ports burst with activity, not with foreign tax collectors hauling away wealth to distant capitals, but with Tamil merchants sending and receiving goods that enrich the land itself. Yet, for all his military brilliance, Rajaraja Cholan's greatest conquest was not carved on a battlefield but in granite. In 1010 CE, after years of planning and toil, the Brihadishwara temple at Tanjore rose to touch the skies. Imagine this. 1,000 years ago, you stand before a towering Vimana nearly 66 meters high, made entirely of granite, a stone not even found in the immediate region, a golden dome glittering in the fierce Tamil sun. Inside, walls covered in inscriptions detailing every donation, every festival, every duty of temple staff, a transparency of governance that many future rulers would not even dream of preferring, but instead to keep their treasuries and decisions locked away in whispers behind palace curtains. The Brihadishwara temple was not merely a temple. It was an epic in stone, a declaration of Chola confidence, engineering, genius, and devotion. No part of it was meant for private indulgence at all. It was entirely built for the gods, the people, and for the ages to come. Under Rajaraja Chola, the empire became a superpower feared by enemies, respected by allies, and admired by traders from as far as away from Arabia and China. While later foreign rulers in India would arrive with swords in hand and tax scrolls in other, stripping what they could and moving on. Rajaraja Chola legacy was one of building, of leaving behind more than he took. And yet, this was only the beginning, for when Rajaraja Cholan's son took the throne, the Cholas roar would reach lands that no Indian ruler had ever touched before. If Rajaraja was the lion, his son Rajendra Cholan was the storm. When Rajendra Cholan took the throne in 1014 CE, he did not see the Chola Empire as a kingdom to be maintained. He saw it as a tide, and the tides are always meant to rise. His first act of greatness was not at sea but on the land. He marched his armies northward, cutting through rival kingdoms with the precision of a master strategist. His campaign reached the Ganges River, a feat no southern ruler had achieved ever before. And when he reached its sacred banks, he did not just dip his hands in holy waters and called it a day. No, Rajendra Cholan ordered the Ganges waters to be carried back in golden jars to his new capital, Gangaikonda Cholapuram, the city of the Chola who brought the Ganga. This was more than a symbolism. It was a statement. The Cholas were not bound by geography. Their power flowed from the Himalayas to the southern seas, but it was on the ocean that Rajendra Cholan became truly unstoppable. In 1025 CE, he unleashed a naval expedition that would make the world take notice. The target? The Sri Vijaya Empire, a maritime power controlling the choke points of Southeast Asia, what is today of Indonesia and Malaysia. The Chola fleet, vast and disciplined, cut through the waves like blades. They stormed the Sri Vijayan ports, defeated their navy, and seized control of the crucial trade routes stretching from the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea. And here's the thing, Rajendra Cholan did not conquer these lands to plant flags or drain them dry for his personal good. No, endless caravans of looted treasuries disappearing into some far off foreign desert capital. No, the Cholas were enforcers of free trade, ensuring Tamil merchants could move silk, spices, and precious stones across Asia without kneeling to toll collectors or foreign customsmen who thought the world owed them tribute. Rajendra Cholan understood something many rulers, both in his lifetime and long after, never grasped. That lasting power comes not from taking what is already built and hoarding it, but from creating networks where prosperity flows in both directions. His ships returned from Southeast Asia laden not just with treasure but with diplomatic treaties, new trade partners, and a reputation that thundered across the seas. From China to Arabia, the Chola name became synonymous with naval might. While future rulers in the subcontinent would be remembered for the monuments they built with the wealth of others, Rajendra Chola will be remembered or was remembered for the oceans he commanded, the skill of his own people. The Chola roar now echoed not just across India but across the waves, and the world was listening. Even as their armies conquered and ships ruled the oceans, the Cholas knew true glory was not just in power, it was in culture, art, and devotion. The Chola court was not merely a palace where kings sharpened their swords and plotted campaigns. It was a fountain, a living spring of art, music, and literature. Under the Cholas, Dravidian temple architecture reached heights it had never known before. Temples were not just stone structures for worship, they were living cities filled with scholars, dancers, musicians, poets, and artisans. The Chola temple were universities of culture, places where the divine and everyday met in perfect harmony. It was in the same golden era that the bronze icons of Nataraja, the cosmic dancer, were crafted masterpieces that even today are considered the pinnacle of the Indian sculpture. These were not lifeless idols cast in a hurry to impress the visiting envoys. They were works of devotion. Each curve of Shiva's form speaking of cosmic rhythm, each flame in his halo a verse in the poetry of creation. Tamil literature flourished, supported not by forced thits or arbitrary taxes funneled into self glorifying palaces, but by structured patronage system where poets, scholars, and performers thrived without fear of censorship. The Cholas understood that power was not just the ability to command armies, it was the ability to inspire generations through stories, music, and ideas. And yet, for all their grandeur, the Chola administration was a marvel of efficiency. Village assemblies had autonomy. Revenue records were so meticulous that a farmer in a small hamlet could know exactly how much grain went to the temple, went to the granary, and went to the crown. Compare that to other rulers who came later, whose governance often amounted to little more than squeezing as much as possible from the land to just fund another extravagant tomb or pleasure palace far away from the fields they drained. Trade in the era of Chola was booming from the ports of Nagapattinam and Kaveripattinam. Great ships sailed to China, Middle East, and East Africa, their hulls filled with spices, silk, gems, and fine textiles. And when those ships arrived in distant markets, their cargo carried more than wealth. It carried identity. Every coin stamped with the Chola tiger emblem was a silent ambassador, a mark of power recognized far beyond the shores of India. This was an age where prosperity flowed from the temples to the markets, from the markets to the seas, and from the seas back to the temples again. A circle of life and trade that kept the Chola world vibrant. It was a time when a farmer could look up from his plough and see the soaring temple tower and know it was built by the hands of his own people for the glory of gods he worshipped in a land ruled by kings who shared his language, his festivals, and his courage, his heritage. An age not defined by how much was taken from the land, but how much was given back. But no empire lasts forever. From the 13th century, the Chola rule began to soften. The tiger still had claws, but they were no longer sharp enough to hold the vast lands and seas it once commanded. The Pandyas, ancient rivals, sensed weakness and struck. The Hoysalas pressed from another side. The unity that once made the Cholas unshakable began to crumble. For centuries, their kings had been architects of vision, but now palace politics, succession disputes, and endless small wars bled the empire's strength. Their maritime supremacy, once unrivaled, began to waver. New powers rose in Southeast Asia, hungry to control the trade routes the Cholas had so carefully guarded. The great fleets that once cast Chola banners across oceans now lay idle in harbors, their sails gathering dust instead of salt. And as the years passed, a darker change swept across the land. New rulers from distant lands and distant tongues, whose only familiarity with the Tamil culture came from the taxes they extracted from it. They built monuments, yes, but monuments to themselves, not to the gods or the people. Gold that once paid for grand temples and irrigation canals was now melted into decorations for personal tombs. The poetry of Tamil literature was replaced with records of tributes and conquests written in some foreign scripts. By 1279 CE, the once mighty Chola dynasty had faded from the political map. No grand battle marked their end, just a slow, suffocating decline as if the very breath of the empire had been stolen away. And yet, their legacy refused to die. The temples still stood their shadows stretching across centuries. The irrigation systems they built still carried water to fields. The bronze Nataraja still danced in the glow of oil lamps. And the tiger, carved into stone, etched into coins, painted on ancient walls, still roared silently. A reminder that there was a time when the kings ruled not by fear alone but by vision, trade, and shared pride of people. And that is why, even in their twilight, the Cholas were never truly conquered. They live on, not in the hands that taxed them into submission, but in the hearts of those who still see their story as the golden age of the South.